I've had men that are in their 40s come down, and one individual, he came in, he just broke down in tears with me one day, and he's kind of, there's some substance stuff going on, there's other things, and he says, God, I don't know what to do.
Welcome back to the Men's Therapy Podcast. Today's guest is elite third-generation expert Dr. Kyle Hulsebus.
Through his signature 40 over 40 framework, he provides the exact blueprint men need to completely master their health, mindset, and next chapter of life.
One of the main things I see where people start to look, and it's a direction issue. Society told me to do this, and I've done it. Now, what do I do? Or I thought this was my path, and I'm really just not emboldened by life. Now, what do I do? Is it too late? You've got to figure out a way to define it. It doesn't have to be perfect. Everything's evolution. We get caught in perfectionism, I think. Even more so as men in some way.
So there's one thing that stood out where it says, men over 40 need help, but the problem is not testosterone. And I think that is often what people point to, right? Hello, welcome back to the Men's Therapy Podcast. I'm your host, Marc Azoulay, and I'm here with Dr. Kyle Hulsebus. He is a chiropractor that is multi-generational, I think 3 generations at this point. And he works with men over 40 specifically, not only helping them with their physical health, but also their mental health, their emotional health, and their spiritual health. He's created a wonderful program called the 40 over 40, which is a collection of 40 videos, tips, tricks, instructions, practices, processes, all kinds of stuff to really help men go into that next chapter of life as capable, skilled, and open-minded as possible. So Dr. Kyle, welcome to the show.
Wow, thanks for having me, Mark, and everybody listening, thanks for having me.
Yeah, so there's one thing that stood out immediately about your website that I want to ask you about. I think it's a blog or a video or something that you wrote where it says, men over 40 need help, but the problem is not testosterone. And I think that is often what people point to, right? Is like declining testosterone of men over 40. So I'm curious, what your take on that is, and what do you think is happening with guys as they enter midlife?
In my chiropractic practice, I have people that come in all walks of life, and they'll ask me these questions, and I've had them come in before where, and certainly we're just looking at nerve interference and spine snap, but they'll say, Doc, do you think maybe it's because I have low testosterone that I'm feeling this? The way I really break that down, because there's certainly things to look at in our lives, but, sometimes I go, if it's a little bit of a fad thing that you see come, all of a sudden there's a testosterone clinic going down the highway. And I go, well, who goes to the clinic on the highway? But, clearly, and when people are looking for answers, we're looking for answers. I fully understand that. That's why I educate. And so go get tested. Let's see what it really looks like. And then let's see if there is something to address in there. But one thing I look at is I go, Mayo Clinic's not looking at that. Johns Hopkins isn't necessarily jumping into that. And even with certain surgeries, fad surgeries and stuff people look at, and I'll go, why are not the most learned places in the world using the cutting edge stuff that supposedly this private practice guy is doing? And I just ask the question that way. My clinical experience with people is I've had men that have gone and got tested, multiple, I mean, not even over 40. I mean, I've had 20-year-olds that have asked me and checked that. And 80-year-olds that have checked that. For the most part, the majority, I find they don't really have a testosterone problem. And certainly we see stuff going on with their nerves. We see stuff going on because your physical body, you're going through the world, the universe, through life with this physical body you want to be able to take care of. And certainly the chemistry is part of it. But one of the main things I see where people start to look, and it's a direction issue. It's, society told me to do this, and I've done it. Now what do I do? Or I thought this was my path, and I'm really just not emboldened by life. Now what do I do? Is it too late? My kids graduated. Maybe I still want to have kids, and I'm 45. It's little things like that I see come up. And so that's kind of where that comes from as far as just, the testing. And I don't see the testosterone as being a major issue clinically in the world.
Yeah. So here it's more like existential issues. And then that's what I see, being a therapist, right? That's what people come and chat with us about is those issues. And those 2 categories that you brought up, I want to dig into each of them because I think they're really unique and different. So I actually want to start with the less popular one, the one that I think people are not talking about, which I'm happy you brought up, which is the person that feels behind. Right? The person that is 45, maybe pushing 50 and doesn't have children, doesn't have a career really to speak of that they're proud of, maybe they're struggling with a substance abuse problem, right? Or they're, haven't really been able to live independently for a long stretch of time or something like that, right? And they feel really behind. Can you tell me about that archetypal person and how you would help them?
The biggest thing I look at with that, I mean, I have an individual that really has been in that way, kind of down, just, where we can look at every lifestyle factor known to God and man. Was it your parents? Was it that you failed in school? Was it all these different things? And I've had men that are in their 40s come down, and one individual, he came in, he just broke down in tears with me one day, and he's kind of, yeah, there's some substance stuff going on, there's other things, and he says, God, I don't know what to do. I mean, I was looking at a bunch of guys playing basketball that were in their 20s, and I used to be able to do that, and I just don't know how to do it anymore. I don't know what to do. And the first thing I look at him, I don't even really delve into the existential. I don't delve into the, I say two things. I go, number one, why do you want to play basketball? Like, do you have a really compelling reason? Because if you don't, your odds are you're not going to bother doing it, nor are you going to do the actions that get you there. So number one, do you have a compelling reason for that specifically? Or is it something else? Is it just, well, I want to have this sort of physical fitness? But get it, you've got to figure out a way to define it. It doesn't have to be perfect. It doesn't have to be, everything's evolution. We get caught in perfectionism, I think. Even more so as men, some ways. We blame the women. The women have to be perfect. I go, yeah, that's probably because it's our fault. All the women are the reflection of us. And, but this individual, and I looked at him and he goes, I just don't think I'm healthy enough to work out. I mean, you see some guys, life has worn them down, and you're right. And suddenly you go, I don't know what to do. I can't even do a push-up anymore. I said, well, we can start with wall push-ups then, can't we? And he goes, well, I can only do 10 of them. I go, great. Do 10. Do it every day until you can do 20. Do 20 every day until you can do 10 on the floor. It's little things. And the reason I look at it that way, Mark, is we're made of trillions of individual cells. We're made of little things. I mean, I think there was a quote that somebody has about they said that it's really all the major changes in the world, governments and everything, have always been done by a small group of people. It's always the little things that make the big things. So in fact, on that line, just to interrupt you, I saw a quote by another chiropractor earlier today that he posted. It was really a funny thing. It said, we're all so worried about these stories where we travel back in time and little things we do in the past will have big repercussions in the future. We don't think that maybe little things we do now can affect our futures.
And that's what it is. I mean, so you're talking about stuff that I love to chat with my guys about, right? The idea of like consistency, right? Like discipline, reliability. And what I really want to, narrow this conversation into is humility, and I really tell my guys, the soapbox I get on is like, humility is truly a spiritual endeavor, right? I mean, think of, it's been through religion and spirituality and all these kind of like mystics talk about the value of humility. And for that client you're talking about, right, who has to admit, not just to, you, but to himself, which is probably harder. Like, yeah, I can't do a push-up, and I can only do wall push-ups, and maybe I can do 10 and then I'm smoked for the whole day. Like that takes a lot of humility. And I really do think, to piggyback on what you said, it takes that why, it takes something that is beyond the self to be able to enact that humility. And I think as men, we don't have really good models for humility, one, and to your point, I think we are expected to be perfect. We're expected to have all the answers. I think society doesn't have a lot of room for men that don't know, right? Or men that are imperfect or that are messy, right? There's not a lot of space for that.
And it's like you said, in society. I mean, it's a societal thing, and we put that burden on ourselves. There's, people talk about toxic masculinity, and to be fair, I don't know how I'd really define that. I see everybody kind of defines it different. But really the way I would look at that is I go, getting caught in this sort of illusion that you're supposed to be a certain way, when you sort of look at the most powerful men that you could admire that say, I would love to live up to that standard. They were messy, right? I mean, they just kind of lived. I mean, they weren't perfect. They could admit they weren't perfect, and they could keep going forward anyway. I mean, I could complain about my dad all day, but in the end, he's, still one of those guys where I go, yeah, but he's just a real solid individual. Not just a man, but just an individual.
Someone who made it work, and I think men nowadays are starting to talk more about that messiness. I think we need as much of that as possible, because I think the younger generation, they look up and they're either like, I don't want to be like these assholes, or they say, I'll never be like these people, and they struggle to start, they struggle to get the ball rolling, and they don't realize that everyone who's you put on a pedestal was just like you at some point.
I was on interestingly you say that. I was on a show a few months ago, I remember, and they said, what do you got for, individuals over 40 overall? And I said, well, this person did this over 40 and this one didn't accomplish this. And like Patrick Stewart, he didn't really get to be known until he was 46. That's when he got on Star Trek at 46. And it goes, well, yeah, but those are celebrities. I'm talking about regular people. And I went, but all celebrities were regular people. My point is, if they hadn't done this, you wouldn't know who they are anyway. We look back now 40 years later and say, oh, they're so great. I go, yeah, but they began. I mean, you read, I read Patrick Stewart's autobiography. He'll certainly admit all his ups and downs. He's gone through the ringer on that. And it's great to read some of that stuff.
Yeah. And that people are those role models, right? That tell you what the path is like. Yeah. And I think it's like, there are positive male communities. I think most male communities are actually positive. I think of like the martial arts community as an easy reach of people that there's people that will kick your ass. Like they could kill you, right, if they wanted to. But everyone at the top is actually very respectful of everyone that's just starting because they know what it takes. They know how courageous it takes to show up and start doing, jujitsu, right, or getting involved in taekwondo or something, right? They see how difficult that is and they respect that. And I think that's the stuff that we need to just be publicizing more, that it's not, I think the toxic masculinity is overblown. And I think it turns a lot of men off. It's most male communities that I've been a part of and I've, experienced are pretty accepting as long as you, play by the rules and know where you fit in and you're not a dick, I think most guys are pretty cool.
Yeah. Well, you just, whether it's male or, even mixed communities and everything else. I mean, I come from the theater. I've got male friends across the spectrum. So, and they're all, to me, they're all just individuals. They're friends. I think that's what we forget is your people.
And you get intimidated, right? People see stuff online and think the world is mean, but I think most people are not mean. Going back to the topic, I'm curious about this breakpoint, right? This 40 breakpoint. I'm 36 myself, right? I'm about to be 40. And what I talked about with my wife a lot, actually, as we're kind of designing our lives, we just have a daughter. We're thinking about, okay, what decisions are we going to make now? Because I feel like at this 40 age is you got to make some really meaningful decisions and life tends to split. So one that I hear you talking about is physical fitness, right? You can either really kind of get your shit figured out and figure out what your routine and life's going to be, or else I think you crater pretty quickly. Another one that we talk about is substances, right? Drinking and smoking or whatever, right? You got to kind of get that figured out, or else you add another 10 years and you kind of crater quickly. I'm curious for you, what you think about that idea or how you help people make the right decisions at this, what feels like a really critical crossroads, because, things like recovery are not as strong. Things like brain plasticity isn't as strong, right? For certain financial goals, you need to start 30 years in advance, right? There's a lot of pressure, I think, in this midlife phase.
To address one thing, just from the science I've studied, it's more of a myth that you're going to lose a lot at your 40s. It's really in your 60s where you really start to see the neuroplasticity. But even then, if you've kept up with it, it doesn't exist there. People worry about testosterone. I go, well, if you're not using it, you are going to start to lose it at some point. So a lot of those little things where, your muscles will start to atrophy or all this, I go, no, that's really, that's in your 60s. That's getting into your 70s. And Jack LaLanne proved that it doesn't have to be that way. And, he was still 93 and doing wild physical feats. And he was on, he took nothing. He didn't take steroids or anything to keep himself fit. He just worked out and ate well and lived life. So there's another guy to kind of look and go, okay, that's why when people are like, you speak on human potential, what does that mean? I go, because I'm looking at the potential. I try not to look at limits. There's certain limits that we're all going to run into, but part of what I look at is, more than anything, are we hitting the limit because somebody told us the limit was there, or are we hitting the limit simply because we worked so hard to get as far as we could, and then all of a sudden, boom, there's the limit. And, because you probably have seen that when you've talked to other people on here, like, yeah, you just kind of kept pushing the boundary that somebody told you was there. And then you found out that no, the limit's not there. I mean, health is an old word, and it literally means uh, state of whole being, state of wholeness. And in order to keep that state of whole being, that state of wholeness, we want to look not just at the physical. You said, when we look, you can have a healthy spiritual pursuit, you can have healthy learning, you have healthy job, you have a healthy bottom line financially, you have healthy social life, healthy relationships, healthy body, leadership, all these other things. So when I look at it, I'm trying to look at a wholeness. So people get to 40. That's, when I found that quote after I created it, then I found the quote by Carl Jung that said life really does begin at 40. Everything leading up to that is just practice. And then I started to see, I go, my God, you're right. I mean, it's over and over and over. You see the average hits about, we take 40 years. The 30 under 30 is cool. And it's great to look up to. And I don't dissuade anybody from that, but it's one of the biggest things I found is, at 40 is sort of this turning point, because we may only live to 80. We only live to 60. We don't know. But, you're getting to 36, you're new parent. And my brother is, my youngest brother turns 41 this year. He became a dad last year when he was 40, his first kid. And, so many people are ending that adventure at 40 because they started at 20. He's beginning. My friend Danny down in Texas, he's, I think, 39 and his wife's 40, and they just had their first kid a few months ago. And they're starting that adventure now. They did all this other stuff. Suddenly, and just chatting with all of them, I mean, the life upheaval, like, oh my God, what are we going to do? Now you have to be in shape.
Yeah.
Because how old's your kid?
Oh, she's a baby. She's 5 months old. So it's brand
5
new.
months.
Brand new.
So when she's 2, you're going to have to be in good shape.
Yes, exactly.
Because she's going to be moving.
Yes.
Right?
Well, yeah, I started CrossFit like 3 years ago for that reason.
Yeah,
I was
exactly.
like, I need to be able to keep up with her when she's like running back and forth, and I need to be able to pick her up and throw her around and do all this stuff.
Exactly. Yeah, you want to be able to get on the floor and get back up again. So physically, I always say it's very easy to kind of look and say physically, and then, but when people come into my office and we look at the sort of we call it psychosomatic, right? So it's the brain controlling the body type of stuff. And we look at the psychosomatic factors as well as the physical factors going on. But I'll have people that come in, there's one guy who'd come in and finally I had to sit him down and I go, every time you get this issue, we're able to adjust you. We're able to get you better. I know you're eating this way. I know you're working out. I know you're doing this. What the hell's going on in your life? Because every 3 months we're dealing with it. What's going on? He goes, there's nothing going on. I go, stop, just stop. Tell me. I go, I don't care. I'm not here to judge you. I'm here to help you. And sometimes I get it out. Sometimes I don't. This guy told me what was going on in his life. It's, I'm not going to share it, but, we sat down and I go, how can you correct that? And it was kind of I need to learn here. I need to have a conversation here that I'm just sort of been afraid to have because I'm worried that the consequences will be my fear rather than the other way it could possibly go. And just kind of sit and resolve all that. And all of a sudden they come back and they go like, I haven't felt this light. I go, great, you communicated. My whole job is about restoring communication and expressing self, expressing life, expressing your soul without stop. And if you got a shitty job you hate, that's going to wear you down. If you got a relationship issue you don't want to address, parents sometimes they don't want to have to brain up what's going on with their kids. And it's bothering them. And they're like, oh, but all my friends. And I go, stop. All your friends have the same problems you do. Trust me.
Exactly. Yeah. Everyone's just fronting, Yeah.
Their children look good around you. My dad used to say, God, I've got this reputation and my kids are doing all this and I've got the worst kids in the world. I have friends that I'm like, Dad, you have no idea how good we were. I mean, yeah, we did some wild stuff, but it's part of being a teenager and not being afraid of anything. So, so what, that the easiest way for me to address it is to kind of go around the wheel. And when I have an individual that really says, I really, really want help with all these other aspects, it's all right. Now, now let's pull the bag of tools out. Now let's start to look. I have these 40 tips that are all just, who it's not one size fits all. That's why there's 40. And it went well with 40 years. So we did 40. And, they span that whole run. There's spiritual ones, there's mental ones. But now just to clarify mental health, when I'm not talking about psychological stuff, that I put in the somatic over with physical. This is about your learning. This is about your developing your mind. You can see, anybody that's looking at me on video, you can see I love books. I've got a lot. And I span the gamut. So, but there's that. And then there's having a healthy job. I've got to talk to them. There's things about your work. There's things to learn about money. There's things to help your relationships. There's things to reevaluate your beliefs. There's things about your social structure, and and then physical stuff. Yeah, exercise, eat right, do yoga, dance, swim, walk, breathe. I've never met a healthy person that didn't breathe. And so that's number one. But you know what number 40 is? But you brought it up earlier, so I'll say it now. Number 40, because I said when we first envisioned it, it was going to be like a series, but I think it's wiser for everybody to kind of read through and see what works best for them. But number 40 on my list is swallow your pride. And I made it 40 because I said you almost got to do all 39 to be able to get there. But they're all little things. I mean, when you come to a chiropractor and the chiropractor says, you're going to see me 57 times in the next 12 weeks. They go, why? Do you need that much practice? And I go, no. Well, trust me, we need to make small incremental changes. We're going to do an adjustment every single time we see you. But it's in order to allow small incremental adjustments to change within your body for it to repair, shift, change. It's not that I need that many times to see you. In fact, I couldn't adjust you 57 times in a day and get the same result. I have to adjust you consistently with discipline, as you said earlier, over time, in order for the change to be more permanent. Nothing's terribly permanent, but in order to get you from A to X. And then, because people say, can I just go to maintenance care? I go, well, you don't want to maintain where you are. You're complaining about that. But if you went to the gym, if you went to a personal trainer and you said, yeah, I want to have a six pack, they're going to go, all right, you're going to work out this way for 90 days. You're going to go, well, maybe I want to come every now and again when I feel like I really need to do it. And they're going to, well, then don't get a six pack. And it's the same with it. You're in therapy.
Same thing. Yeah. It's very consistent, right? It's like small changes. And it's stuff that you really can't see until you're on the other end of it, right? So there also is like a faith component or a trust component almost, right? To know that like this is working and we're moving towards health. I wanted to ask you, like, where should somebody start? I don't know if you have like an audit process or a great jumping off point, because what I hear from a lot of guys is they get overwhelmed by the amount of information out there, and you're on social media, right? You're seeing like influencers for everything, right? Like you see the guy with the six pack, you see the guy that can run 200 miles. You can see the person who's dating the most beautiful woman you can think of. You see the richest man ever, right? Like it's just constant. Yeah. And all of them are saying, hey, do what I do, right? Follow my thing, do my thing. And I think a lot of guys get kind of paralyzed by that. So I'm curious, with the 40 over 40, where does somebody start, or how do you make a recommendation to start to build that foundation and just like get the flywheel turning?
When that's kind of what I am, because people say, I want you to tell me what to do. And I go, no, I'm just not going to do that. You know what? You can call any of 10 million gurus out there and they'll tell you what to do. And they have the one secret trick that worked. But I find everybody's an individual. So I try, the beauty that kind of worked for me with 40 was, well, now I've got this wide variety. And and people are like, well, can you do it by category? I go, no, let's scatter it around. Like if you look through my bookshelf, it's funny. People ask, what's your system? I go, it's the no system. It's just these books look good here, so I put them there. It's not alphabetical. It's not by category. It's not by genre. It's not by nothing. I mean, I've got weird science next to history, next to fantasy, next to crime thrillers, next to John Muir, next to theater. I don't care. So when I threw 40 together, it just kind of goes all over the place. So that's why I tell people, I go, well, just, start there. The reason I made number 1 breathe, I can make that joke about breathing, but when you're overwhelmed, what do you tell people when you're overwhelmed? You say, stop, take a breath, just breathe, just, ground yourself a little bit. Just hold on, go get connected. I think if we get into like esoteric stuff, not the Mars Venus crap, but the more the, men are sort of the earthy component, right? And in the first chapter of Genesis in the Bible, they said God made all the human beings, brought them up out of the dirt and made them of the dirt. And, not to get theological, but but men are a little more earthy, and then women are a little more like fiery and airy. And, and you can kind of get into that, but ground yourself. I mean, there's that idea in yoga, not as a fruity practice, but more when we go thousands of years back to the foundation of yoga, it was breath work. It was grounding breath work. The physical stuff came centuries later. And, so I tell everybody, start there. Start with a breath. And then the second, and in my series, you can walk and do the incline and swim and dance and do objectives and goals. And those are great. And I want everybody to get to that. But start by just take 3 in its abdominal breaths. Like really just, you know what, guys, nobody's watching. Let the belly out. Your wife doesn't care anyway. And, just kind of let that go and just breathe it in, get it out, put it all down, do it 3 times, and then stop and say, all right, let's get a breath. Let's take a breath. And then number 11 is turn off your phone and stop watching the news. Stop. And one of them is stop comparing yourself. I mean, so those are 3 right there. Plus breathe is 4. And, the minute you stop doing that, then you can sit and go, okay, now I'm done looking at where everybody else is. I've got some ideas of things that look neat to me. But now you're at the point where you can ground yourself and, really you can go, okay, well, what do you want? What really do you want? And, like you said, I'll run into a lot of people and not just divorced men, but widowers. Young age too. I've got, one of my classmates, his wife just very suddenly, I think, passed away, and he was only 43 with 7 kids. And what do I want? It's, I'm going to go and make my life go this way. And I know he's kind of gone forward with that, but it's one of those things, even in a divorce, or a sudden change of relationship, that's not terribly uncommon. I relate it, almost in a funny way, where I say you're either at 40, you're probably pretty set in your relationship, or you figured out that I no longer want this one and I'm ready for a change. And I don't know, maybe I've never talked to a divorce attorney about it, but the statistics for that on the ages would be kind of curious to see. Is it around that age where people start to go, all right, I want these goals, she wants these goals, and off we go.
Yeah, I think by and large it is. I mean, there's a 7-year itch, which is actually backed up by research. Like usually at 7 years, either you stay married or you get divorced. And I think that's like a cycle, right? That's like a cycle of growth, probably for most people. And it's like, yeah, either you're growing together or at the very least compatibly, or you're growing separate. And I think that's what causes most divorce. Like people grow in different directions, or one person grows, one person doesn't really grow, or maybe grows in a way that's not so healthy.
Or they don't talk about it.
Right. Yeah. Or everything's shut down. Yeah. It's just living in resentment and lies.
Or you say, okay, honey, we'll go that way, when secretly you don't want to go that way. And with somebody like that, because I've had those guys come in and they go, yeah, I don't know what to do. And I've had it on both ends, of course, but I look and I go, well, what objectives did you want? And they go, well, I wanted to stay married. I go, no, that's done. We're past that. And that one's over. Maybe we passed that stone 10 years ago. We should have talked then. But rather than look and go, this was the most awful event in my life, or these things went on, so go back and go, okay, well, what have we learned from this scenario? And telling me that, well, I know I'll never do that again. That ain't true. I think you've seen that.
Oh, for sure.
You know,
Yeah, without significant work, you will almost certainly do it again. Right?
and not only, yeah, I mean, in your practice, probably the same as me, you've had people come in and go, well, I got divorced again. And it was the same thing. And so I go, look and see if you can figure out, because you didn't, maybe you got married because, it was, you got her pregnant, we got to go. And that happens. But there've been some phenomenal partnerships that have come out of that. And then there've been others that don't. And it's, what can you look back at something like that and say, okay, well, where did it turn down the path of we want to be partners? And what changed there? Was it me? And that's the swallow your pride part, right? Humble yourself. Did I do that? Maybe I did. It took two to have the relationship. Yeah. It might have taken one to stop talking, but then both stopped. I've seen that even in my own family. So it's, I find it always goes back to connection and communication. And so if you are truly interested in having another relationship, I can just about guarantee you're going to have one. I got my one younger, I have three brothers. So my one that's the next youngest, the one just between me and the youngest, he's never been married, never really done a long-term relationship. I was actually interested. There's nothing in his life that says he really cares. And he never really but I've known other people like my other two brothers on either end that are different than me and him. I'm married, but is they've almost always kind of gone from one relationship to the next. Like they can't be alone. This is not a judgment. It's just who you are. You always want somebody else to kind of partner with. And a lot of times when men get divorced, it's kind of like, now we've got the next partner. But are you going to change?
Yeah. And that's the thing is, like, and if you don't change, you're going to get the same partner with a different coat of paint, because you're going to still attract the same people. You're going to still be attracted to the same person, right? Like the patterns are going to still be there, unless you correct it. And I imagine there's got to be a chiropractic, metaphor or simile there, right? Of like, I imagine the body, when I say the body goes back to old tensile patterns, right? Especially under stress. So you have to do a lot of interventions to really repattern your life.
It's the same thing. That's why, from a chiropractic perspective, I go, we're going to adjust your perception along with your body. I do both. But the way we look at it, because we study it in cycles, everything works in cycles. As I tell men, I go, women have more obvious cycles than men, but we still have cycles. Okay. It's, and you do through your whole life. And that's sometimes where I think we go, the testosterone thing. Yeah, you probably do have cycles where it goes lower and higher. Those are just cycles. They just, there's no obvious way to see it. So we don't know. But in the body, what we talk about when you're getting symptoms of disease and symptoms of sickness and things that show up, it's feedback to your what we call your educated brain from your innate brain to say, hey buddy, wake up. And symptoms show up. We ignore them for years. Men are much more famous than that than women, but women do it too. But it's that feedback. And here's the interesting thing that's actually happening. Your body is caught in a positive feedback cycle, a positive feedback loop. And it's constantly it's that whole thing. It's okay, buddy. It's okay. You'll never, nothing will ever go wrong. It's okay. And because there's too much positive, to tell a kid that rather than sitting there and go, no, you're not doing a good stance there in the baseball. He's never going to learn to hit a good baseball if you just keep telling him he's doing fine. We need to give so your body gets caught in that positive feedback loop. And so it keeps breaking down. And what I do from a physical ability and then also from sort of a mental standpoint is kind of what you probably do when you just kind of slap people around, I'm sure. When you're like, stop.
I mean, a lot of therapists just validate that that's not effective, right? Like you need to be like, hey man, this is a real issue. Like it's time to really work on this thing.
So what are you doing? You got to throw a little negative feedback in the system. That changes it. So a chiropractic adjustment, people are like, it's violent. Like, well, you got to put a force in order to get you off the positive feedback loop to start getting it to change. But I got to keep doing that. Otherwise you go back to the pattern. Your brain loves patterns. Hey, I mean, you've seen them.
Yeah. So tell me more about that, right? Because I think there's something really deep about that. You know, like you're talking about things like denial, right? You talk about things about being stuck in like an echo chamber, whether that's of comparison or just of like inflated ego or something, right? But I'm curious, like, do you see that? How often you see that in the people that you work with? Does that manifest physically for people? You know, I really like your holistic kind of, you know, east-west approach, right? Where I think everything is connected. The mind and body are the same thing.
That's, you know, I mean, right away people ask, they go, why are you x-raying my whole spine when I've got a low back problem? I go, it's all one body.
Well, it's all one spine. I mean, even that, right? It's like, for sure.
That's the people come in from an auto accident, you know, they're like, well, it's my neck that hurts. And I go, I noticed the whole body was in the car. Or when they try to tell me that my knee hurts because I run, I said, did only the one knee go running? You know, the whole body went with. So it can't just be that. It's this idea, you know, holistically, how do you break patterns? Little things, just little things. I mean, we adjust. I mean, people walk in and they're like, how do you know, my friend's a cardiologist. He asked me one day, so how many people do you see in a day? I said, well, on a busy day, it's 200, but you know, on an average day, you know, maybe anywhere from 60 to 100 people. And he says, Jesus Christ. I go, why? How many do you see? He goes, 15. You know, and I'm not allowed to have a lot of time with them. He wants more time. He wants to see 5 people a day, but you know, because he wants an hour and a half with them. But you know, he goes, why? I go, because unless you're having a big issue, or we're doing an exam, or you had some injury, or you have questions, you know, we always set time aside for questions. I go, you're coming in for me to adjust your spine on whatever pattern we're trying to change with you. I'm going to see you for 2 minutes. I'm going to ask you if you have any questions, and then we're going to get on to the next person. You know, I'm not a fly by night, run in the room and just and run out again. But at the same time, it's I'm not there. See, we don't do therapy. People think they go, what's the difference between a chiropractor and a physical therapist? I go, well, number one, we don't do therapy. So I'm not here to cure your pain. I'm not here to remove your problem. What I'm here to do is provide a specific, focused adjustment in the misaligned areas of your spine to remove interference, to restore communication and connection from your central nervous system to the periphery and back, so that your body, in its wisdom, its innate wisdom, knows how to self-repair. And we're going to do that over time to break your brain's pattern of holding it that way, so that you can continue to do that more on your own than you need me. You know, when people come in to maintain once a month, they're doing that voluntarily just for health. But we send them home with a lot of stuff to do and say, this is how you got to take care of it. And you've got to do it every day. It's like brushing your teeth. How do you get healthy teeth? You brush them, you floss them. Does that mean you're never going to have a problem? No. But you're wiser to be doing care. You're wiser to be reading a little bit. You're wiser to doing a little breathing or grounding exercise. You're wiser to go have the conversation than not, because if you don't, you'll never know. If you do and it goes wrong, well, it was going to go wrong whether you had it or not.
You might as well have some level of control or some level of, like, you know, proactiveness in that.
I listened to a guy, his name, I'd never heard of him before. Apparently he was well known, but his name is T.D. Jakes. He's a bishop. You know, I don't know the denomination, but I saw him on an event and he was a speaker. He's a brilliant speaker. He's great to listen to. But he's got his sort of gimmick in his talk that he does that really, you know, like I got 40 over 40. His thing was, don't drop the mic. He said, because the minute, and that stuck with me very well about communication. He said, the minute you drop the mic and walk away, you've said you've ended communication. The conversation, people like, we need a mic drop moment. I go, no, we don't. You know, because otherwise that's the pride thing, right? You know, boom, you can't top me. Instead, it's you know, you and I are sitting here, we're having a dialogue. It's not a one-sided thing. Unless the internet freezes up, then maybe it will be. But the you know, the point is he said, don't let the communication die. And I go, that's right. I mean, my job as a doctor of chiropractic is to remove interference to communication. It's remove interference of connection. And I can do that, you know, asking you where you are in life. I can do that physically. I'm going to do that by helping you explore. As we do workshops in the office, my wife and I, and take people through that type of stuff. So when I threw these 40 things out there, it was just, here's some things you can try in your own life. Simply.
Yeah, and try and like report back, right? Like communicate around what's going on.
One of the things I had when I was talking to one, it was a lady, like, hi, she goes, but I think that, I think the relationship's coming apart and, we don't talk to each other and we got this going on. And I looked and I said, what do you say to that? And I go, well, do you want the relationship to end? I mean, that's kind of, let's establish that right away. And they go, no, I don't. I go, great. When's the last time you just sat down and talked to each other? It wasn't about all these bills. It wasn't, oh, I'm tired, or it's not all the kids. It was just, when's the last time you just chatted with each other? It's not date night. We don't have to worry about going to the movies and having the roses and that. Beautiful if you want to. But if you feel it's not going well with your wife or your partner, or, you're living, or however your relationship status is, or even with your parents, hell, with your kids. I've seen that fall apart more with kids than I think with spouses. With men, it's communication, and you don't have to be the font of wisdom. You don't have to be the most knowledgeable guy in the room. You just have to sit down and go, tell me about your life. How are you? I think that's a big question to ask, because we get caught in the persona of the mask.
Yeah, it goes a long way. Yes, I think you saw a lot of people, a lot of parents get stuck in logistics only. Then the kid sees you as just like a hard ass, right? Or like as a taskmaster. A question I wanted to ask you, actually come with one of my CrossFit classes that one of the coaches said that always stuck with me, and I use it with my clients. This idea where he says, the older generations of men specifically, were broken, right? They were broken by life. They were broken by injury. They were broken by hard labor. And the younger generation, right, like me included, are weak. Like we never really built up certain musculatures or skills or abilities. I think that's also true emotionally in many ways, where, like you're dealing with broken people versus weak people. I'm curious if that distinction resonates for you, if you see that in the work that you do, whether that be physical or some of the more mental, emotional stuff, and then how do you tackle each of those challenges?
The first part of the question, the weak emotionally, is yes, I fully agree with that, because it's, and I only know so many of the older generation, the same way you probably do. But is this, I think it takes a hell of a lot of strength. I gave a lecture on leadership. I think it takes a hell of a lot of strength in leadership to admit your faults and to just communicate. You don't, again, you don't have to sit there and share your feelings, but you can't sit there and just hide everything, everything you are, and put these walls up and just go, nobody can know that I have vulnerabilities. And the analogy I made is in like a wolf pack, the alpha male, all the betas, all the lesser males come over and they bear themselves and make themselves vulnerable to the leader. But the leader got there by first making himself vulnerable to the leader to move up, to bear it all, because it didn't start alpha. The alpha eventually gets challenged. And I think the alpha, I'm not a biological expert in any way that way, but I would have a feeling that the alpha finally gets challenged when the alpha is afraid to be vulnerable to the lessers, and no longer just has that quiet strength of leadership. And that goes back to that pride issue is, it takes a lot of strength to swallow your pride and to go in. It's one of the things my father taught me through time. He says, if you do something wrong, just go admit that you did it wrong. He goes, yeah, somebody might be pissed at you for it, but at least you told them.
Yeah, at least you're honest. Yeah, I think like lying is the worst thing.
But even in my office, something I've looked right at people and I go, that wasn't supposed to happen. I think I might have made a mistake. Let's go get you help. Rather than, oh, well, yeah, it happens sometimes. We'll see you on Monday. But to really go and look and say, and you learn those lessons hard through time too. When you're young, you're like, oh, I don't want anybody to know I did that. But you just kind of learn the hard way. We're usually around 40 when we get to the point where we just go, just say it, just do it and be done. The leader, you can usually say, yeah, screwed that one up. Let's move on.
Yeah. And if you can deal with it quickly, right, you can actually fix the problem instead of just spending all the energy and effort, like bearing the lead, or destroying evidence.
That's going to catch up with you. And you always see where that goes out. I'm reading The Story of Civilization by Will Durant right now. And I mean, you just watch it through the centuries. Everybody that tried to cover it up. You're watching it right now with all these people that did fraud for 5 years, and it's coming back to bite them. And I go, I hope you enjoyed your 5 years of luxury.
Yeah, because that's going to blow apart. That's the thing.
What was the point of that? But it's a hard thing. We keep kind of circling back around here to pride, to swallow your pride, to have the strength to humble yourself. And that's not humiliate yourself, but we call it that. But that old thing in high school where, you don't want anybody to know this went on and everybody's going to laugh at you. But after a while, you just go, well, everybody laughed at me. Great. I got the reputation as this guy. Life goes on. Man, I was in the theater. I was a weird kid. So, I didn't care what anybody thought about me.
Yeah, the people that are laughing are insecure, right? Like they're projecting all their insecurities onto you. Again, I think probably as you get older more people are like, wow, okay, that guy is like, he's really struggling, but he's working. Like you see the, classic example, overweight person at the gym, like, sweating bullets on a treadmill. Like I have the most respect for that guy because that's like starting from zero is really, really hard. Like when the momentum's rolling, it's a lot easier.
I had a housemate in chiropractic college, awesome guy, great friend. He's, his dad was a chiropractor. And when I met him, he was he's about 6'5", but he was heavily overweight. And for chiropractic, we're doing these different workouts and stuff to get our specific musculature so we can have great speed and precision. And one of the things we decided to do was we did the P90X program. And we did it. And I said, all right, well then we're getting up at 5. And he could do he could do a push-up, but he could only go down so far because of his body. And we figured, and what we did was we figured out workarounds for it. So it worked, and he just got up and worked it. And he struggled with that, but he just kind of kept doing, he'd get burned out and he'd stop for a little bit and then he'd go back to it. And then he'd go and he'd go. And the last time I saw him in person, he'd slimmed down. He was never going to be real trim again in his life, but he wasn't big guy like that. He had everything sort of under his own control where he wanted it to be, where he knew he could fluctuate, but it wasn't so far off center that he was going to struggle to back there. And he did it by just showing up every day. And there were days where he didn't show up because he just couldn't. And then he just got up one day and showed up again and just went until he couldn't. And that's the other thing that's where we need to humble ourselves. We're going to fail. Every little kid, you're going to watch your little girl there in 5-6 months learn to walk. If you don't let her fall, she's not going to learn to stand. I mean, it's just the way I've watched parents do it in my office. And I go, let the kid go. I go, there's nothing the kid's going to hurt himself out in here. Let him fall a couple times. He'll figure it out. Don't keep him away from 20 sets of stairs, but.
And that's where it's critical, right? Again, it's like you fell and you get back on because, on social media, we get this like beautiful whitewashing or everything where it's I was overweight, I was fat. And then I did P90X every single day, never missed a day. And now I'm jacked as shit. And it's like, there's no way that's the real story. Like if you're being honest about where you were or where you are now, it's like the story you said, right? It's like cycles, it's a lot of ups and downs, it's a lot of like getting discouraged, but then, ultimately persevering. But it's not like a clear trajectory. I think that's some of the biggest lies that we can believe out there.
That program the guys do, I've never done it, but I know a bunch of people that have. They do the 75 hard, and they go, all right, you're going to read this much, you're going to do this workout, you're going to do it, and you're going to do it 75 days in a row.
The completion rate on that is unbelievably low.
But here's the interesting thing, because I knew a guy that just did it. If you miss a day, you start from day one until you do 75 days in a row. And I had one guy, he said, took me 208 days, but I got my 75. And every time you do that, you learn, you grow a little bit. It's I like to do goal journals. If you do goal journals, I found this beautiful one because I love stories. It's called the Hero's Journal, and they ask that question in there. They go, write your quest, because he uses the hero's journey from can't think of people's names today, but yeah, from Joseph Campbell, and he's using all of that. They put one question in there, and it said, what's the worst that can happen if you do it? I grow. Even if I fail, I grow. I can't help but grow. I can't help but, I go out, oh, well, I failed at learning how to run a manufacturing plant. Yeah, but look at all the skills you built in the meantime. Oh, I tried to get to do 100 push-ups. I could only get to 50. Yeah, well, what were you before?
That distinction of like, weak people versus broken people, right? Like, I think, if you can humbly admit that, yeah, you're kind of weak, you need to introduce challenge into your life. You need friction. And I think that's what you're talking about, right? It's like you need to take on a challenge, start the manufacturing plant or whatever. And the goal doesn't matter, but like by overcoming those challenges or at least attempting the challenge, that's how you grow.
But something that has importance to you somewhere. Like just doing it, that again gets into the gurus. Well, this is the one you need to be doing. Do the one that you love. If it's, I used to do National Novel Writers Month. That's a hell of a challenge, but not everybody wants to do that. And people are like, well, did you fail? And I go, yeah, one year I only did 30,000 words instead of 50,000 words. And they're like, oh, then what was the point of the challenge? Like, I wrote 30,000 words. How many did you do? I mean, the average person wants to write a book, they can't get past page 4. Because the whole point was speed. It was get out of your way. Right? I completed it 4 times.
Yeah. And like a little bit scary, right? I think it should be like a little bit scary, not crazy, but just like a little bit like, whoa, okay. Like it should feel like a challenge.
My wife met me. She didn't know how to swim. And we all swim in my family. So, I mean, she went. She's all right, let's go. She did. She went out in the ocean. I'll tell you what, first time she went out in that ocean, she's wearing that life vest. And, suddenly we're in 30 feet of water. And she's on the surface. She goes, what am I going to do? I go, float. I go, I'll haul you in. It's not a big deal. Now she goes out by herself. I mean, it took her years, but, she did. That was because it was important to her to be able to spend time with me in that regard. So, find something in there, back to the relationship thing. Great. Find a challenge, maybe something that you can do together. I've known people that have sat down and learned Italian together and then gone to Italy. We ballroom dance. And not a lot of men will go out and learn to ballroom dance by themselves. That's why I don't have a partner. I'll dance with anybody I got. I got male teachers, I got female teachers, I got my wife. I just go dance. And because it's learning that beauty of lead and follow. But that's sometimes I think it's hard for people to admit. But I think the fantasy and the pride is probably the biggest block. I don't know if you see that.
Yeah, it gets people stuck, and they get stuck in being critics, right, and judgmental, but because they haven't accomplished anything, and they know that, right? Like I think that the most critical people are like the least successful often, whatever that success is for them.
There's, unless you're Roger Ebert and Siskel, then they make their living off of giving you their opinions. But but that even brings up, I had I'll call him more of an acquaintance and a real good friend. That he by the measure of success, which actually means success in Spanish. In Spanish, the word for success is éxito, and I always thought that was really interesting. And I looked up the etymology, and it came from the Latin excitare, and to exit, to go out of. And I thought, well, that's interesting, because success then means that you've reached the end. And so do we want to have objectives, or do we want to have success sometimes? Well, I have a successful relationship. Well, wait, what does that mean? And then you find out, that the illusion cracked, and, then, well, what happened to the relationship? Well, it turned out that, right, we hit the exit. And so it's sort of that lifetime, that mission and vision rather than that. So, by measures of success, my friend had, financially, I when I first met him, great relationship, they were the power couple. They're building extra businesses on top of these businesses, and they're working with this. And I'm seeing that he's doing stuff with private jets, and, working with these great leaders and doing stuff. And I did a mastermind with him for a short time, and I was like, cool, it was really, it was great. But it was, I set an objective to have this, and then suddenly it came on the market, and then we did this, and, you got to get, but that was also the, Bitcoin's the next big thing. We got to put all our money there because that's what's going to take off. And came back and bit a few people, I think, from that. But he kept having that measure, and the one relationship ended because they realized that, what are we doing? We don't really want to be together. And then I saw, just through posts for years, great relationship, doing some amazing things. I mean, I just send messages every now and again saying, dude, that looks awesome. I'm glad you're having such a fantastic time. You look like you're just living the life that you dreamed, that you said. And then I was just shocked 2 years ago when I found out he committed suicide. He was 54. And, on that peak, that top of the world. And I didn't know him well enough to really go, it must have been this or this. You can only speculate. But I sit there and I go, somewhere in there, he went from objective to fantasy, is my speculation. And he could never make life equal to fantasy. Because the whole thing, when you work with people that are probably on the edge of suicide or have dealt with suicide, and it's obviously a big issue with men over 40, is that's where I think we get caught up in the fantasy or the illusion or the nightmare of, this is the way it's supposed to be and I'm not there, rather than loving that I'm here now where I am and look at all the room for growth I have.
Right. Yeah. And you're living in a feeling of constant failure, right? And constant, just like, there's a hole in the bucket, right? Like, you just, whatever you put in just leaks out. Dr. Kyle, I really enjoyed the conversation. As people are listening, if they feel inspired by this talk, what's something they can do right away? Something that they can, action they can take, something they can read, something they can look up, whatever it is, right after this podcast episode ends, to take action on this?
I'd say go to my website. It's 40over40.com. It's 40over40.com. You can get on there. It's $40. You can get the entire series, and it's good to you for life. You get videos, you get audios, you get an ebook. You can go in, and it's choose your own adventure, friends. There's stuff in there for everybody. I encourage everybody to do everything, but go see what fits for you where you're in your life right now. And the second action I'd tell you is look and see where you're at in your life right now, and maybe what you'd like to be doing. Yeah,
and what I'm hearing is, like, just be brutally honest about that. Like, we're to improve. I'm sure you got a tip that covers whatever that certain category is.
Well, and then not only that, this is the initial series. We're going to create one that is just for men specifically, in addressing some of the stuff we've even spoken to today that's already going. So you'll have the opportunity to have even more there as you try to expand.
Very cool. Well, excited when that comes out. Definitely let me know. I'll send it out to the audience here. Well, thank you so much for coming on the show. If you want to find more about you online, you mentioned the website, but are there any social media platforms, anything else that they should follow or check out?
Yeah, absolutely. The Instagram's at 40over40. Certainly, if you love some fun little inspirational videos, I travel around. I like to just talk about random topics and throw them on my YouTube station. That's at Dr. Kyle Hulsebus. And if you go to 40over40.com, all those things are able to be accessed right from there too. You can get on, subscribe, like it, hook you up.
Great. And listen, we'll have all of those links in the show notes. So go ahead and check that stuff out. You can click right through and check out what Dr. Kyle has to offer. So thanks again for coming on the show.
No, thank you so much for having me. It's been an absolute pleasure to kind of share, health and longevity and after 40.
Critical topic. Happy you're out there doing that work. So listeners, thank you so much for tuning in. And we'll see you next week in an episode of the Men's Therapy Podcast.